As promised, here I am talking again about my journeys. I had the amazing opportunity to visit England and I visited some cities, and I've been trying to share my journey in small parts. On my previous video, we talked about Cheltenham and some nearby places. Today's journey, we're going to Bath, historical city in the county of Somerset, alongside the River Avon, which is one of those cases where the Celtic word of Avon means river, so it's actually named River. Leaving that aside, arriving to the station that was built in 1840, from the second floor of the station you have this beautiful window, and from there you can see the city and you can start to see how beautiful it is. It is quite enchanting, and this is the station of Bath Spa. If you saw my last video, you might recall that in that video I talked about Cheltenham Spa, another train station. Now the spa thing, it basically means that the area, that city or big village, whatever you want to call it, was particularly known for being a village place, as in a village to visit for health reasons, specifically for mineral waters. But while Cheltenham was known for this in the 1700s, Bath was known for this by the Romans. The original name was Aqua Solis, and I want to stop for a little bit because it's one of those nuggets of info that I just love. Aqua from the Latin word meaning water, and you can see it in Italian as aqua, so remaining basically the same, and in Spanish with a little bit of a change with agua. But then we have Solis, which means soiled, and in Italian suolo, in Spanish suelo. So you have all of these connections, but it's actually a combination of things. It's not just Latin, it's a combination with Celtic and Roman from the deity of Sulis Minerva. And I don't know, I thought it was neat. The name of the city, Bath, which was what it was later known by, comes from Old English, and it remains basically with the same meaning, which is to put your body in a body of water. And in this area, being known as Bath, it fully makes sense because all the way from the Romans, these mineral waters was what made the city everything that it is today. All of its developments throughout the years are because of those. So once again, already known by the Romans and by the Celtics, already used for its beautiful waters, in 973, a chapel, tiny church, was built by the Saxons. However, this was built for the King Edgar, the first king of England. It was for his coronation. It was later rebuilt by the Normans, and I just want to put a pin on that abbey because yes, in that area that you can still visit today, well, that went through a lot of changes, so put a pin on that. During the medieval times, it was a great time for Bath because of the wool trade and then the cloth trade. And the city still has some of its medieval walls that you can see in various points of the city. Worry not, there are signs that can tell you not only that that is a medieval wall, but also can explain to you some of the history behind it. Also near the center and the abbey and the original Roman baths, we had the market. First described in 1371, it also had a lot of changes throughout the time. But I just think it's interesting because a market is something that basically every village, every city has. And this one is a very fascinating one. But it was under Queen Elizabeth I that Bath became a proper city. Once again, the abbey that had fallen into decay was restored, finishing in 1620. Another thing from the 1600s is actually Sales Lun's eating house. Still up to date, it is one of the oldest houses in Bath. Eating house meaning it's a restaurant that you can actually visit and eat there. And they have a Georgian kitchen still using it to make Bath buns, which are clearly from this area. Like I said with Cheltenham, it was in the 1700s that the re-wanting of the mineral waters, the re-interest in these things came up. But actually at the time, Bath had already reclaimed its position as one of the first ones. So between the fame they already had and this explosion of wanting of mineral waters, it became a fashionable point to visit. It kind of became a resort of sorts. And with those changes, of course, became a change in everything, because when you bring money, then you need to develop further. So a lot of plans in architecture and design additions began. And this is something that I understand, although I don't fully agree, that there are some aspects, some decisions that humans have made in various moments of life in regards to various things that are often overlooked. And I think often not, architecture and design are one of those things. Probably because it is often not all boil down to, oh, if it looks pretty at the time, that's it. It's just about aesthetics of the time. And it's like, yeah, of course, but also there's a lot of history behind choices. All of the details, all of the designing which aesthetic to follow, which designing what to add here and there, all of this can be indicators of so many aspects about the culture of the time and the mentality. Not to get too much into it in this video, but the main idea during this period, it was to combine things. It wasn't just about making things look pretty. There was actually a lot of thought behind it. And the main idea was to not hide the Roman things or just build over it, was to make them look a bit more as they always have been there. So restore those, and all of the additions needed to make sense. There was a lot of work on proportions and details and a lot of decisions in regards to making everything blend together. And this is where the ideas of style and what's aesthetic and what is nice to look at, again, tell you a lot about the mentality. In fact, what they started to have in their minds in this case is basically maintain the classics. So Roman and Greek, beautiful, amazing. Let's retake that. Let's build some of new stuff, but taking that into consideration. But let's also add a little bit of the Renaissance. Let's keep the classics, let's add some color, and then let's do it in modern times. And that's actually a mentality that remained all the way to the Victorians. And the reason why it's important is because a lot of decisions that people in positions of power made can also be incredibly based by that, both for the good and for bad. So for example, in the case of this city, the choices were amazing because it also brings a lot of more money and tourists to this area. So it did help it. It looks pretty, and even now, well, it is one of the main reasons to visit it. But I don't have to explain to you. You can genuinely see it when you're just walking around. Some of the main things are, for example, King's Circus, which is a circle that has two beautiful trees in the middle, and all around that there are buildings, creating this very aesthetically pleasing to look at circle of buildings. There are 3 rows that go from and out of the circle, but the main one is known as Gay Street. And if you follow Gay Street, you arrive to Queen Square, a beautiful park that they do sometimes markets in. But what's interesting is that from the air, well, if you unite all of that, you have the King's Circus, Gay Street, and then Queen Square, creating a key shape, which is a Masonic symbol that the designers kind of put in there. And I don't know, I thought it was kind of fascinating. Nearby, there's another famous place, which is the Royal Crescent. With the circus, we have a full circle. In this case, we have just half of it, a little bit wider and a little bit more on the open. That is now turned into a hotel. Then we have Pulteney Bridge, another beautiful case of something that was blended just so well that you could kind of say, well, might have been made by the Romans themselves. Or maybe not the Romans, but it looks as it has been there for ages. And this is another case of not just it looks good. It's not just about that. It's the connection. A bridge does that. Connects various parts of a place with other people. It allows people to get in and to go out, but also it looks over the river. The river that it's beautiful, that has given so much to it because those waters are what made Bath, Bath. Another place to visit is the Royal Victoria Park. Made in 1829, it was not only one of the first public parks in the country, but it was made with the money of the residents. And the idea behind doing it with the money was for it to stay there. So the city couldn't just do whatever they wanted. It was theirs, and so it remains as one of the main examples of Victorian architecture. There's even a botanical garden and hot air balloon services. But what I think is also interesting is what the Royal Victoria Park was opened by Vicky herself when she was 11 years old. Remember the market? That changed a lot here and there. There was a period in which they opened to more people, then there was a period in which they had so much people they was a bit unhygienic, and then the main one that we can still see today was erected in 1861. And you can absolutely go in and find all sorts of stuff. It is quite beautiful. And remember the Abbey? Yes, that other one that changed a lot throughout the years. Well, it kept on doing that, but instead of rebuilding from scratch, it was more like an addition on addition on addition. Restored on the different people even after World War I and II, when it wasn't destroyed, even though there were air raids in the area. But some changes needed to be made, of course. But in an interesting, lovely, I think, fascinating turn of events, in 1973, Queen Elizabeth II visited the Abbey to commemorate, well, King Edward, the first King of England. 1,000 years of history. And this is what I think it's fascinating, which is this place, this area here, in front of the Abbey, it has been there and has seen everything that has happened. Even before the 1,000 years there, it has so much history on its ground, like the soil itself. I think that's fascinating. There's also the assembly rooms, also made in the 1700s. Now, those were actually destroyed by the air raids, but were reopened in 1963. And they turned into a fashion museum, which, of course, it was closed when I went there. I guess I'll have to go back. But besides that, you have the Museum of Bath Architecture, the Victoria Art Gallery, Herschel Museum of Astronomy, and Halberd Museum. There's not just Bath and the beauty of the city itself, but you also have some things surrounding it. Nearby, you can visit the Stone Age, Castle Combe, and a safari park. Yeah, safari parks. So with all of this in mind, it does make sense that in 1987 it became part of UNESCO. Now I recommend you, if you want to check exactly why it became part of UNESCO, well, it's on the web page, so you can check that and put the link down below. But yeah, I mean, even without all of the explanation of why, it does make sense. This is a beautiful place. That is not just because of the architecture, it actually also has connections with some famous people. Roald Dahl, author of Charlie and the Chocolate Factory and Matilda, he actually wrote a short story called The Landlady that takes place in Bath. Jane Austen, actually lived there for a little bit. Apparently she didn't like it, but 2 of her stories are set in Bath. There's actually the Jane Austen Center that you can absolutely visit. And nearby that center, there's actually Mary Shelley's House of Frankenstein. Yes, the Queen of Goth also walked those roads. And in more modern times, the city was used as background for a series known as Bridgerton. And honestly, I agree, it is such a cinematic place. In fact, I have to say that, and tell me if you would do this too, if there was a party, let's say a theme party of some time periods, I would absolutely love to go full dress, full cosplay, and be there. It's just that amazing. Now, I actually haven't seen the series, but it does look pretty. Funny enough, it reminds me of Lecco, which is a city here nearby that is also quite historically important. It has a lot of history that you can see in the architecture and some designs choices. But at the same time, it is modernized because you find a lot of shops, very modern ones. You don't just have the classic market, but you have just normal restaurants and shops. For example, in Bath, we actually had breakfast at a Colombian place. Delicious brownies and a great cappuccino. And they also sold a lot of other snacks and things there. And you can actually find restaurants of all sorts of things. So I would have to say it's one of those places that not only is historically important for all of those reasons, but it's just great to visit and to do some shopping. I mean, the train station itself, it's a mall, so. But one of the things that I quite recommend, I guess, about Bath is that even though I wasn't able to visit the museums, and granted museums can take a little bit to, visit the whole thing, in reality, everything is quite close by. So if you just want to look at the city, that's what we did because everything was closed. We actually turned home quite early. There was still sun out there, which is winter, which that means it was quite early yet. So just walking around, you can do the whole thing. There were a couple of areas that are uphill, but besides those areas, everything was quite plain and quite easy to move in. And again, very aesthetically pleasing. At a certain point, I kind of just sit down on a bench when I realized that the fashion museum was actually closed. And because I got me a juice from the Colombian store, I just sat down and had it, and it was so beautiful. I don't know, it was aesthetic, even just doing that. So yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but I quite liked this place. It was really, really beautiful. And we also had a hot dog that was delicious, and that just adds point for me. There were people performing. They were selling wood ties. That was great. And it was just a really, really pretty place to be at. So I'm quite happy. I am curious, however, what are your thoughts? Have you ever been to Bath? And maybe, if you have been, if you know more about it, is there a place that I didn't visit or that I didn't talk about? Please, some recommendations would be lovely. But also, would you visit? Would you be in that party that I talked about? Actually, those parties. We could do all sorts of eras. But in general, would you visit Bath? Well, let me know down below. Also, in the link, there's going to be all of the sites for the information. I think I forgot to say that last time, but it happens. Next time around, I'm going to a city that, well, it is historical, sure, but there's something about it. It just hits different. Until next time, hope you have a lovely day. Bye. As the extra things to tell you about, I got this shirt there. I love tartan and it can be so hard to find in the colors that I love. And this was just a perfect finding. I had to have it. Come on. But also, I collect postcards. I'm one of those people. And I got this beautiful one at the market. And it's bath at night, which will be lovely during a summer night. Oh, that was so lovely.